Morning, Court. I'm excited to be speaking with you today and finding out all of the wonderful things that you have to share with us. Would you mind starting by introducing yourself and your business?
So my name is Court. I am a clinical nutritionist and my business is Court Garfoot Nutrition.
Thank you for joining me today, Court. Could you talk to us a little bit about what a clinical nutritionist would do and the kind of people that you would help?
Absolutely. So I am a clinical nutritionist, which is different from a nutritionist and a dietitian. So it's quite a confusing space to be in. Clinical nutritionists work in all areas of health because nutrition impacts so many aspects of our health and well-being. I work a lot in the preconception, pregnancy, postpartum, and reproductive health space. So I take a very holistic approach, which means that I look at everything that is contributing to health concerns and well-being in that area. So looking at what you're eating, any supplements you're taking, medications you're taking, lifestyle, all those, sleep, stress, all those factors that are coming in together that impact your health and well-being. I see people who have particular health concerns. So they might have experienced preeclampsia in a previous pregnancy, or they might have fertility concerns and they've been trying for a while and nothing's happening, or they're going down the road of IVF. But I will also see clients who are being proactive and just wanting to feel their best during pregnancy.
I wonder, you talked a little bit about maybe the potential medical reasons people might see you. Would you recommend that people see a nutritionist anyway, just for health, regardless of whether even you're pregnant, whether you've got issues in your pregnancy? Is it something you'd recommend people do?
Nutritionists can help with many symptoms of pregnancy, such as morning sickness, fatigue, leg cramps, reflux, all those symptoms that we often put up with during pregnancy that we don't have to just put up with.
I think something that seems to affect most people, and you're lucky if you get away with it, is morning sickness, which is a misnomer because often it's not just in the morning. Have you got some great tips about for people with morning sickness or all-day sickness?
Absolutely. Firstly, if you are fortunate enough to be planning your pregnancy, making sure your nutrient levels are high going into pregnancy can be really important in case you do get morning sickness. And that means that your nutrient levels don't get too depleted. And you can also alleviate some of those symptoms. Eating something small regularly can also help, because we find that if those blood glucose levels drop too much, then our morning sickness increases. So even if that's just a handful of dry biscuits or a piece of toast, having something small regularly can be helpful. There is some research around probiotics and vitamin B6 being helpful for morning sickness. But that is something that I would recommend you talking to a practitioner about to make sure you're getting a safe dose for pregnancy. And also being aware that, like, sometimes you do need medication and there is nothing wrong with taking that option if it is going to improve your sleep, hydration, and everything else that you need for pregnancy. If you're experiencing morning sickness, it can be really helpful to keep some dry, plain food next to the bed and have it before you get up in the morning. Because if we can try and get some food in before the nausea starts, it can sometimes help alleviate it during the day. Ginger can also be helpful for some people. So you can look at like the crystallized dried ginger or having ginger in a tea, but that's something worth trying as well. Another important thing to note with morning sickness is that acupuncture can be very helpful. So if you have an acupuncturist in your area that also works in pregnancy, they can help alleviate some of the nausea as well.
Great advice. I think people can utilize all of this village to really help enhance that experience.
Absolutely. And we know that morning sickness and those symptoms are worse earlier on in pregnancy, and our nutrient requirements increase the further along we get in pregnancy. So if we're getting too much of a depletion early on, it can make symptoms such as fatigue worse in that second and third trimester.
Brilliant.
that's great advice.
It's so true. It's kind of it takes over if you're not eating well. It has an impact through many areas. Something that I know as a midwife, we do advise people definitely to see a nutritionist for is gestational diabetes. And the diagnosis is definitely on the increase lately. Is there a preferred or a more useful gestation for you to see people? Is it just when it's diagnosed, or is it kind of, even if you have gestational diabetes, is there a kind of a time frame that is a great time to see a nutritionist?
As soon as possible is great to see a nutritionist. Regarding the gestational diabetes, there is a lot that we can do in managing that gestational diabetes. So if you have you've been diagnosed and you've cut out your carbohydrates because you feel like that's the best thing to do, and you're finding that it's still not being adequately diet controlled, I would really, really recommend getting advice from someone who works in the pregnancy space, because managing gestational diabetes is slightly different to managing other forms of diabetes, because we're managing that hormonal element as well. When we're looking at managing gestational diabetes, we're not only looking at reducing our blood glucose spikes and insulin spikes, but we're also looking at foods that increase our insulin sensitivity. So those are foods like cinnamon, spring onions, vinegars that increase the uptake of insulin into the cells, which can really help manage those blood glucose levels.
Fantastic. I hear so often people are not feeling supported once they get the diagnosis. Sometimes it's weeks and months before they see anyone in the hospital who's there to support their diabetes. So it would be fabulous if they accessed your services or a nutritionist really soon.
Absolutely. And there is a number of us nutritionists in private practice that you can access quite quickly compared to the waits of the hospital system. So that is always an option. You don't need a referral to see a clinical nutritionist. You can just book in. So if you aren't feeling supported by your hospital system or by your current care team in regards to your nutrition or gestational diabetes or anything like that, you are more than welcome to just book an appointment with a clinical nutritionist.
Really good to know. I was going to ask, do you need a referral, because you are specialist in the field? So
Absolutely.
To know that people can access that service, valuable.
Yes, definitely.
Is there, other than those obvious things, morning sickness and gestational diabetes, is there a range of people that you tend to see more than others?
I do see quite a range of people. I'm seeing quite a few clients at the moment in like that preconception care space who are going down the path of IVF and wanting some more support. Seeing people who have had previous pregnancies who are looking to avoid complications like gestational diabetes again, or they've had preeclampsia last time that they're looking to avoid or manage better this time. And it really does vary. Yes.
Do you have many people who would love to know about weight loss? It's a concerning issue in pregnancy that people don't want to be putting on too much weight. They know it's coming and they want to get not have so much weight to lose after they have a baby.
Absolutely. And it is something that I often talk about with clients because, as you mentioned, and as you would know as a midwife, we do need to gain a certain amount of weight. And that is important to not only sustain baby now, but we need fat stores to create milk after we have the baby, if we're looking at breastfeeding and things like that. In terms of the actual amount gained, that actually really depends on your weight at the start. So people who are a lower weight at the start tend to gain more than people who are a higher weight at the start of pregnancy. But it also does depend a bit on nutrition and making sure that we're adequately nourishing mum and baby during the pregnancy.
Along those lines, is there something that is a really common misconception or a myth about what people should do when they're pregnant?
I'm not sure about like myths around what you should do. I think there's a lot more myths around what you shouldn't be doing in pregnancy. And, not that it's particularly my area, but people like stopping exercise once they're pregnant. And if you've been doing exercise before pregnancy, it is generally safe, unless you've been advised otherwise, to continue with that exercise during pregnancy. From a nutrition point of view, I think most common misconception I get is around supplements and if they're needed and not, and what is needed during pregnancy.
I noticed when I came to Australia that there is one brand of pregnancy supplements that if I had shares in that company, I would be very rich. And then I hear a lot about them not being the most effective or even useful, and sometimes creating nausea and gastric issues. I'm not going to name them, but do you have some advice around that supplementation?
Yeah. That supplement is quite hard to digest. It's also quite low in a lot of key nutrients. Somehow it managed to make its way to be our default recommendation by the medical profession, which is great marketing on their behalf. What we also find is that there are supplements that are available over the counter, and there are also supplements available that are considered practitioner-only supplements. So supplements that are available over the counter have been designed that you and I can go to 5 different shops in a day. We can stock up on a supplement and we can take as much as we like, and we might get an upset tummy, and that's about it. Practitioner only supplements are a much higher quality and they have higher doses of nutrients in them, which mean that they have a better therapeutic effect than supplements that are available off the shelf or over the counter. But they also come with risks, which is why you need to see a practitioner before you have them. So when I'm considering supplements for a client, I'm looking at their previous experiences with supplements. Have they reacted to things previously? What medications and supplements are they on at the moment? Is there going to be any interactions with those? Because supplements can make medications work better or worse. So we need to look at how that's working together. And if it's going to have an impact on any other nutrient levels that we're looking at, because things work together as like a jigsaw puzzle. So if we're playing around with one thing, we need to consider the effects that that's going to have upstream and downstream from there. So important to consider that those over-the-counter supplements aren't going to be the same as something you get from a practitioner. There are a few really great supplements that are available over the counter or off the shelf, but it's once again considering, are they the right nutrients and are they the right one for you? Like there's one I can think of that is a pretty good prenatal, but it doesn't have any iron in it. So people, like if I'm looking for one without iron, I'm like, that's a really good option for you, but most people need iron during their pregnancy. And so a lot of the supplements that I do end up recommending are practitioner supplements because they are that higher quality, they're easier to absorb. Because they're higher quality nutrients, they often have less side effects. So you do get less nausea. We don't want to bring in a supplement that's going to increase nausea, particularly early in pregnancy. And a lot of gastrointestinal symptoms also come up during pregnancy, and we don't want to exacerbate those.
So thinking about supplements, I think some misunderstanding in the population that if you have an issue such as iron deficiency, you should reach for a supplement. And I know your whole skill base is around looking at the foods you can eat that should mean that you don't become iron deficient or might really help that. Can you talk a little bit about how to increase your levels of iron without reaching for supplementation?
Absolutely. When we're looking at iron levels or any deficiency, so the starting point when we're looking at a deficiency is it a consumption issue? So are we getting enough through our diet? Is it an absorption issue? So if we're having enough, are we actually absorbing it and using it appropriately? And is it a usage issue? So are we using or losing too much of it in a different way? When we're looking particularly at pregnancy, so we could have a consumption issue, in which case we can increase our iron levels through a variety of foods that are really rich in iron, like spinach and red meat and things like that. We can increase our absorption of iron through having our sources of iron with a source of vitamin C. such as lemon juice or a glass of orange juice, but also being aware that tea and coffee will reduce iron absorption. So not having your tea and coffee too close to dinner will impact your iron absorption. And then obviously our usage of iron is going to go up during pregnancy because baby needs a lot of iron to grow. Placenta also needs a lot of iron. So being aware of that and increasing our iron intake to adjust for that usage is important.
Lots of people are turned off foods with the morning sickness. Is that something that once that kind of dissipates, probably around the second trimester, then would be a great time to really increase that iron intake if you've not managed to in the early trimester?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a great time to be increasing it because baby's also going to need more and be doing a lot of growing in that second trimester.
And to give it time to build up as well, rather than wait until it's a problem, start early.
Definitely. And as a holistic practitioner, when I look at blood tests, I'm looking at things being at an optimal level, not just within range. So when you get your blood test done at the GP, most of them, not all, most, will look at something being within reference range. And that reference range is based on being an average of the population, which I'm not very happy with my health being based on because as a population, we're not all that healthy. And it also doesn't necessarily account for like where you are in terms of your life stage. So if you get your bloods done before pregnancy and you're planning a pregnancy, it'll just be based off the average of the population when we know that demands of pregnancy are higher. So ideally your stores of iron are higher going into pregnancy. It's the same in trimester 1. I will often look at a blood test and see that it's just within range and go, we need to bump that up because not happy with us being just within range in trimester 1, knowing what's coming in trimester 2 and 3. It's the same going into trimester 3. We want to make sure that our iron levels are quite high because there is a risk of hemorrhaging with childbirth. And low iron increases fatigue, which is not what we want to be experiencing in that postpartum period. So if we can have our iron levels nice and high going into that 3rd trimester, we can alleviate the need for infusions, which are quite common, and there's nothing wrong if you do need an infusion. But also preventing that drop in postpartum is also very important.
So, Court, what is the most common question that you think you get asked?
I think the most common question I'd be asked is, are prenatal vitamins necessary? Do I actually need to be taking prenatal vitamins? And the answer to that is yes, because the nutrient requirements of pregnancy are significantly higher than our nutrient requirements when we're not pregnant. And it's not just for baby, it's for you as well. So baby will often get whatever they need. We know that if baby needs more calcium, they will draw calcium out of your bones. It's you who suffers when we don't have the right level of nutrients. So often someone will say, oh, but I didn't take prenatal vitamins last time and my baby's fine. Yes, your baby's fine, but how did you feel during that pregnancy? How did you feel in that postpartum period? What symptoms did you have? How was your birth? All that can be impacted by your level of nutrients as well as the baby. And obviously there is a lot of factors that we can't control in pregnancy. Nutrition is something we can control. So if we can make sure that we're getting optimal levels of nutrients, it's really important to do so.
Make me think about if you're seeing there are people who maintain their levels of energy, they maintain their fitness and health schedule. So would you recommend people who are doing strenuous physical exercise in pregnancy always see a nutritionist to make sure they've got that balance right?
Absolutely. And to just make sure that they're consistently recovering from that exercise as well, to be able to support them, their pregnancy needs and baby's needs as well.
I think it's a really great time to talk about. The reason I reached out to you to be involved in this project is because you are a specialist in the whole fertility, pregnancy and birth area. I wonder if you can talk to us, what is it that specifically you offer people that maybe other nutritionists don't? And what are those qualifications that are involved? What is something that you know is a standout from your service compared to other qualified nutritionists?
So I have a Bachelor of Health Science majoring in nutritional and dietetic medicine. So that allows me to treat people with specific medical conditions. I can give specific individualized advice. I can also prescribe supplements. I can order functional testing. I can interpret testing. That is also within my scope of practice. Nutrition isn't my first career. I did a Bachelor of Law and Marketing before this and worked in marketing for about 8 to 10 years. And I still do a bit of work in marketing as well. And I think having that different background really changes the way that I look at a case. It also changes the way that I analyze and look at research as well. So I think that is what sets me apart as a practitioner. Like, I am very up to date with the latest research in this area, because it is something that I am interested in, and it's also the way that I analyze that.
It's really useful to highlight as well that that's 3 solid years of studying nutrition for medicine, and that's something that general practitioners don't have. They don't have time to solely put probably more than a module on what to eat and how that can enhance your health. So it makes sense that you would be the go-to person.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we are giving someone individualized nutrition advice, there is a lot of skills involved in that. I have to have an understanding of what you're already eating, what you're already doing. I have to understand how your family is structured, who does the food shopping, who does the cooking, what is reasonable for you. I have to have an understanding of the social impact of food, because food is something that we celebrate over. So it might not be reasonable for me to expect you to go gluten-free, vegan, everything else, because that's not, like, the risks, the benefits might not outweigh the level of stress that is going to cause you, and the cost as well of following a diet like that. So I need to have an understanding of those socioeconomic factors of food as well, and also understand behavior change. And that is not something that I can communicate with you, build that rapport, get that information from you in a 15-minute appointment. And that is why I have appointment times and the ability to educate you on why you need to do the things that we're talking about, and have a discussion about what is actually important for you and why you need to be doing these things. Like, it's not enough for me just to say, I want you to do this, this, and this. We need to discuss why and how that's actually going to work in practice. I also have the ability to provide you with meal plans, recipes, and tools like that can put into action the things that we're saying, because it's all well and good for me to tell you that you need to eat more spinach in your diet to increase your iron levels. But if you don't know what you can use spinach in or how to cook with spinach, that's not very helpful advice. It's the same as kale. Like, raw kale does not taste good. No one should eat raw kale. It tastes amazing if you massage it with some lemon juice and olive oil, or you bake it for a little bit. But if you don't know these things, you'll try kale once and be like, I don't like kale, it's disgusting. I also don't like raw kale, but I love it if it has been treated properly. And having the time to give that education and knowledge is really important. It also means you have the chance to ask me any questions, which is equally as important. I'm sure we've all had the experience of walking out of a doctor's appointment or obstetrician appointment or even a midwife appointment sometimes and going, oh, I didn't ask this, this, and this. Which, when you have a longer appointment time, you have that opportunity to ask those questions.
The opportunity, you've got that relationship, then you've got the chance to call up later and get some further advice and ongoing support.
Absolutely.
So it really is much more holistic than take these supplements or increase this level. It's a whole lifestyle kind of benefit that you're offering.
Absolutely.
So that leads me to think, if you've got those qualifications and you're in that space, is there something people should look out for if they're pregnant and they kind of seem to be fine? there's no obvious health issues, there's no diagnosis of anything. Would it be who would they see? A dietitian, a nutritionist, or a clinical nutritionist? Would it matter, do you think?
So during pregnancy, a nutritionist should not be giving specific advice. So a nutritionist can give generalized advice. They can tell you to follow the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating. They can tell you to drink more water, but they can't give specific advice. And during pregnancy, because we know those nutrient demands are going to be constantly changing, it is important to be receiving specific advice. So in that space, you need to be seeing either a clinical nutritionist or a dietitian. Both are very qualified and very similar roles in the community. A clinical nutritionist doesn't have scope to work within a hospital. So like, don't talk to me about peg tubes and nasal gastric feeding tubes and things like that. That's not my area. But in the community, dietitians and clinical nutritionists both do amazing work, and either of them are suitable to be seen during pregnancy.
It would be you who would order those tests and things so that you can check on levels. You have that ability.
We do have that scope of practice, yeah.
Do you offer health fund rebates or Medicare rebates?
We do offer private health insurance rebates. I don't offer Medicare rebates as a clinical nutritionist, but you can claim it on your private health insurance depending on your level of cover and your insurer. My initial consults, I allow 75 minutes for, so just over an hour. And my follow-up appointments, I allow 45 minutes for. We don't often need all that time, but it's there if we do need it. I do offer some express consults as well if there's something urgent that's come up that you just need a quick consult for.
You've had another career and now you've got this one. What is it you specifically love about what you're doing now? What in your role, what kind of makes it something that is an enjoyable job?
Particularly nutrition, I really appreciate the impact nutrition has on all areas of health. The time I get to spend with my clients as well is really important. But also the impact that nutrition has not only during pregnancy for mum and baby now, but that impact it has on that child for life. And we know that the impact, there is significant research at the moment on the impact of paternal nutrition at the point of conception and the impact that has on the genetics and that child's health for life as an adult. If we can get that education happening around good nutrition during pregnancy, we can significantly change and improve breastfeeding outcomes. And even just having a nourished mother, like the impact of nutrition on postnatal depression and anxiety, being able to support that mother in that postnatal period has such an impact on the attachment she has with her child and the impact of health for both of them quite long term. I love working with people during pregnancy because we have such great outcomes during pregnancy. And you see this particularly when I work with women who have had previous pregnancies. So they have that point of comparison to compare it against. And seeing clients who have experienced preeclampsia and not experienced preeclampsia this pregnancy, or they've been diagnosed with gestational diabetes, they're having a lot of trouble being able to manage that. They come and have a consult and then they find it a lot easier to manage it because they have the tools and knowledge of what they need to do to be able to manage it. And seeing people have wonderful pregnancies with low levels of symptoms because they're being nourished in the right way. Like, we can't control everything, but seeing people have quite easy pregnancies really makes it worth it as well. And then you get that reward at the end that like they've had the birth that they were looking for and they've recovered quite easily, which is what we want in an ideal world.
Can nutritionists help with anxiety? So many people are suffering with pregnancy anxiety and generalized anxiety.
Absolutely. So there are quite a few nutrients that increase our level, like increase feelings of stress in the body. And so nutrients like magnesium and our B vitamins can help calm down the body, which can help us rationalize things better, see things from a different perspective, and help manage that anxiety. There's also been quite a few nutrient deficiencies that have been associated with pregnancy and postnatal depression and anxiety. So that's something to be aware of as well. There's also some things nutritionally that can exacerbate feelings of anxiety. So things like not regulating our blood glucose levels and eating food, high processed foods and foods high in sugar can also increase feelings of anxiety. And our body has to do something with everything we put into it. And it also, like all our hormones, all our neurotransmitters, everything our body needs is like, if we think of it like a cake, it needs ingredients, and it needs particular ingredients to be able to make those things. Those ingredients come from our food. So if we're not giving our body the right food, it doesn't have the right ingredients to make our feel-good neurotransmitters. It doesn't have the nutrients it needs to make the hormones that we want and need at a particular time.
I wonder if is there some advice that you have for people who are breastfeeding that they might not have accessed your services before? They may or may not be experiencing either low mood, depression, extreme tiredness, or an issue with their milk supply.
Yeah. Hydration and making sure we're eating enough during breastfeeding is really, really important. I often find that we get so caught up, understandably, in the newborn bubble and looking after this new little human that we've got in our lives, but making sure that we're eating enough and getting enough water in is the most important thing in terms of breastfeeding nutrition. The other thing to be really aware of is that the treatment and prevention guidelines for mastitis changed quite recently. And they changed quite significantly because our understanding of mastitis has changed quite significantly in the last year or so. So if you have had previous children, you need to refresh yourself on the mastitis guidelines and what to do and the early signs of mastitis. The interesting thing from a nutritional point of view is that we now understand that probiotics can be beneficial in preventing and treating mastitis. So if you're finding that you're getting repeated mastitis, or you've even had one experience with mastitis, it's worth checking in with a nutritionist to see if there's anything you can do nutritionally to be preventing that mastitis, because we have a whole lot of understanding now about the breast microbiome that has driven that research.
It's really useful to know. I think something that I read a lot about is people jumping to lactation cookies as this panacea of everything. What advice have you got around those? Are there specific brands, or is it all just about having eaten something little and often?
Research on nutrients that increase milk supply is really mixed, and there's a number of reasons why that's really mixed. It doesn't mean that they don't work. For some people, they will work. It's something that's really hard to research because we obviously can't give something to breastfeeding women that we don't know the safety of. But in saying that, I think it is more important to be making sure you're eating frequently and eating enough than be looking for the breast band of lactation cookies.
I'm just thinking of, I've got one particular client group that have only just come to mind. I haven't worked in the antenatal area for a while. People who are long-term bed rest for whatever reason.
Yes.
I know that when I was in that space, they are prone to really poor nutrition. That hospital diet is not fantastic, but also issues around going to the toilet and constipation because of a lack of mobility. Have you got some advice for people? Maybe something like, what is obviously not everything every day, but a really great meal or kind of snack advice for people who are generally able to eat well, but it would be nice to have something brought in for them?
Yeah, of course. Soups are great because they're really nice and warm and nourishing, particularly if it's something like a chicken and vegetable soup that has some meat and protein in there as well. That gets a lot of nutrients in very nicely. Don't ignore the impact of fruit either, though. So things like pears can be really great to help constipation all the way through pregnancy. Pears and kiwi fruit are my go-to recommendations. for constipation during pregnancy. And making sure you get enough water is also very important. You can, that includes your herbal teas. You can do lemon water, you can do lemon and ginger and honey, whatever it takes to increase that water intake. Sometimes even iced tea can be really helpful to get that required level of water. I think the recommendation for hydration in pregnancy at the moment is at least 3.1 litres a day, which is quite a lot when you think about it, especially when you've got a smaller stomach and someone pushing against your stomach and your bladder. It makes it a bit harder.
It does. When you say iced tea, I'm jumping to those ones on the shelf that are so high in sugar I always avoid. Are those okay? Is it for like one a day? Or are you talking about a different self-made iced tea?
No, there's some that are quite low in sugar that are, well, it depends on the type of sugar actually when you're looking at them, because some of them will include fruit, so they do look quite high in sugar, but if it's coming from the fruit, that's fine.
Is there something of all those myths and guidelines around what not to eat? Some people say that it's gone completely mad. So I saw somebody ask the other day, I've had an olive, will I be safe? Is there something that you know is often reported to be something you should avoid and really has such a minimal risk that it might be fine for most people in most circumstances?
Yeah, the olive one I do see sometimes, which olives are typically fine. New South Wales Health has a great resource on foods for pregnancy. So that's generally my recommendation to go to in terms of foods for pregnancy. In terms of foods that you shouldn't eat, I see a lot more misconceptions around that and breastfeeding than I do for pregnancy. The baby has been tasting everything that you have been eating since about 16 weeks. So there's no need to avoid spicy foods or anything like that unless your baby is having a reaction now. You can have all those foods during pregnancy. The only things to be aware of, during breastfeeding. The only things to be aware of nutritionally during breastfeeding are your level of caffeine intake and your alcohol intake. They are the main things to be aware of. Other than that, if you want to go have a spicy curry, go have a spicy curry. If your baby doesn't react, it's totally fine.
Prompted me to think about people who are finding when they're breastfeeding that they may be getting advice that their baby has some lactose intolerance, and so they start to cut out dairy. Do you advise, well, obviously you do, is it useful for people to see a nutritionist when they're completely changing some aspect of their diet like that?
Very much so, because we want to make sure that, one, we're not taking out things unnecessarily, but two, that we're also getting the right nutrients in our diet still, because if we're taking out lactose, we're often taking out dairy. So are we getting enough calcium to support baby so that it's not draining from our bones, essentially?
It's a great alternative for calcium if you are taking out dairy. If you're
broccoli can be great for calcium. So that's often a good source of calcium. And we also can look at fortified foods. So there are some like oat milks and things like that that have calcium added to it. And if we need to, we can also look at supplements.
Lovely. Okay. So we've moved on to the part of this conversation where I ask all the experts for a pearl of wisdom. Is there something that you'd love every new or expecting mum knew or was aware of?
Absolutely. That you don't have to put up with symptoms. Just because something is common doesn't mean it's normal. So if you're getting any symptoms like the nausea and vomiting early in pregnancy, or even further along in your pregnancy, reflux, restless legs, cramps in legs or abdomen or anything like that, it is always worth talking to a healthcare team, which can include a clinical nutritionist, because it's not something that you have to put up with. Fatigue is, a lot of people put up with fatigue during pregnancy and postpartum, when it can often be attributed to an iron deficiency or a low level of B vitamins. It's not something we have to put up with. And there is something that we can do about these things that can improve your health and well-being and how you feel, just generally and throughout your pregnancy.
So valuable. Is there something that you'd love every new or prospective dad to know?
There is a lot that they can do to support mum and baby, and having a nourished mother means that they can do so much more for that baby as well. So making sure that they're eating and drinking enough is just as important.
Do you have a really good top tip or a practical piece of advice that you'd like to give new or prospective parents?
Getting that high quality prenatal vitamin is very important, and also being aware of the recommendation to continue taking that prenatal vitamin until your 6-week blood tests or until you stop breastfeeding, because your nutrient requirements stay very high during that breastfeeding period. So having that high quality prenatal vitamin can make such a difference to your health and well-being.
What is one essential item or service that really does make life with a new baby easier?
When we're looking at like that postpartum period, being prepared and having food in the freezer and things like that prepared before baby comes can be really important. And that starts in that 3rd trimester of cooking that little bit more food just so that you've got a serve or 2 that can go in the freezer so that you can be nourished in that postpartum period. Absolutely.
Good nutrition is definitely rated. Is there a product or service that you think maybe people won't even have contemplated because they're not aware of it, or something that you think some parents do contemplate, but it might be out of their price range or not available in their geographical area?
There is some meal services, particularly for postpartum care, that can be worth investigating in your area. But also, if you're having a baby shower, ask people to bring some food that you can put in the freezer. If you feel that you're stocked up enough on everything else that you need for baby, having that food can be really nourishing. And it's something that many people are often willing to give as well. So don't be afraid to ask for that food too.
Really good advice. It's something I always recommend. What's one item or service or product that you would say is overrated?
Any over-the-counter supplements. And I say that because if you are going out and buying supplements over the counter without getting advice on what you need, I often find people will come in and be like, here are these 10 supplements that I've been taking and nothing's working. But they might not be working because you're not taking the right dose, or you're not having them at the right time, or it might not be the reason that you're feeling fatigued is that nutrient. So getting some advice before you start taking supplements can save you a lot of money in the long run.
Something that you would advise that people buy more ethically, or considering the environment, something that can help them have less waste?
I think with a lot of our food choices, we can consider the level of waste and the way that we're buying things. So I think it's just generally considering the amount of weight. Like if you have the option to buy things at a farmer's market, it can often be a better way of buying them than buying them at the supermarket. Being aware of what's coming in plastic packaging can be important. It's not the end of the world, and often we're talking about stressed, exhausted mothers who might just need to grab something, and if that means grabbing something from the supermarket on the way home from work, then that's what it is. But being aware of the choices that we're making when we do have the energy to make those choices.
Really useful to know. Thank you. How can people find out more about your services and contact you?
So you can find me on Instagram or on Facebook under Court Garfoot Nutrition. And I have a website, which is courtgarfoot.com. You are welcome to check out a number of my articles there. I have a number of resources going up at the moment, some ebooks, meal plans, recipe books, things like that will be all up there shortly, or by the time this podcast is released. And you are also able to book appointments through the website and email me if you have any questions.
Thank you very much for joining us today, Court, and for helping us to understand how your services can impact the health and wellness of the community.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really appreciated being able to share the information that I've been able to share today and have this conversation with you.
Thank you so much.